Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great episode of CPAC Live. This is Matt Schlapp, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about all things Chinese corona, as much of the nation is still fighting these overly expansive lockdown orders. And the most recent tragedy is what's happening with this poor barber in Michigan, who has been told that he can't open up his shop and he's lost his license from the crusading socialist governor of Michigan because he has the audacity of wanting to pay his bills and give haircuts in a safe and responsible way. We all know that America is ready to get back to work, and we can do it in a way where we don't make each other unhealthy. We have this in us. And we're loving doing this show. This show is an outgrowth of the frustrations we had with the coverage of CPAC and this unending criticism of what our great team at CPAC did at CPAC. Somehow could have started a spread of corona. I was accused personally of giving Chinese corona to the president, to Ivanka, to Jared, fill in the rest of the names. It's been quite an ordeal for a couple of months for the whole country. And although there's great tragedy associated with Chinese corona, there's great mischaracterizations and power grabs associated with the aftermath of all of our knowledge that this virus was going to take hold. So today we have Maj Toure with us. You all know Maj. Maj is plays a big role at CPAC every year and has come to many of our regional CPACs. And we have Peter Pitts on too, Professor Peter Pitts, who is going to let us take a step back and let's start to answer some of these medical questions in a somber, serious, fact-based way. And I think you all know there's a lot of ways to get on CPAC Live. You can watch it on Facebook. You can watch it on Twitter. My preference is that you go to our website at conservative.org, click on the link and register, and then we'll be able to send you notifications of future shows. I think the good news is we're going to keep doing this because, let's face it, digital communications is where it's at. And this allows us to come at you a lot more often, not just at big events, which we're known for, but just continually, weekly, with some of the great people in our CPAC family. And Maj Toure, welcome to CPAC Live. You are part of our CPAC family.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I felt really, really good last, a few months ago, at the annual event. It was a great time, as always. And we just pushing those conservative principles, especially in areas where we need it the most, like urban America, where I'm from and what I represent. So thank you so much, y'all, for having me. You know how awesome y'all are.
We sometimes we are. Now I got to tell you, Maj, usually I'm doing this show from my home, but today I'm in a special location. I'm at the home of Bill and Sarah Walton. Bill Walton is one of our ACU board members, so he's part of the CPAC family too. We're on top of a mountain, not in the swamp, but in Washington, Virginia, a tiny little town 90 miles outside of Washington, D.C., and it's just a great location. So if you see behind me a bear or something crawling around behind me in the window, don't be alarmed. It's just the way the rural folk, that's how they live. You might hear some animal noises in the back, Maj.
It's just a normal Monday bear walk. That's right. nothing too heavy.
That's exactly right. Well, you're the founder of Black Guns Matter. And you've been known as an advocate for the Second Amendment. And I know that you have a whole philosophy that guides you and that, adds to your important voice as we debate the issues of the day. What's been your personal experience with this whole outbreak of Chinese corona? You been safe?
Yeah, I've been extremely safe. I started initially a Instagram group of epidemiologists, virologists, ERs, people that work in the ER and people that work exactly, directly with COVID patients, because I wanted to speak from a perspective of not my perspective, but people that are actually dealing with COVID. And what we've seen is obviously certain people, and this is all across the country, we've seen certain areas obviously are hit harder, but I cannot ignore the level of stat padding. I cannot ignore the level of governmental from the local to, I can only say local and state, overreach. I mean, again, in the beginning, we based this off of a model that nobody wants to look like the politician that's sitting on their hands. Nobody wants to not do anything. But those models and projections were not based on data. Now we have data from places that were the hardest hit. And, the CDC and all of these different things, the blame game. I was at CPAC. I was in the front row. I was in the VIP area, which, by the way, the food is amazing in the VIP area, by the way. I was in these areas and I haven't coughed. I haven't sneezed. I saw leftist media try to make it seem as if CPAC was the harbinger of death to promote the China virus. And it's just untrue. Now, I get the initial nervousness because, again, you don't want to feel like, you were responsible for anyone getting any type of sickness. But it's just been as the data, the actual facts, math, science, and doctors across the country have been started to state, like this looks like a perfect storm of overreach, financial gain. And this does not mean that this virus doesn't exist, as some people try to say, but there's some financial lying involved in this. And people just don't want to own that. So there's a way to say, hey, we jumped the gun because we didn't want people to get super sick based on these projections. Now, as the fear has subsided a bit, now let's approach and do what's best for our nation. And the best thing right now is, since we haven't seen millions of people dying, we magically have seen, flu cases.
Maj, you missed Joe Biden. He ran through all the statistics with us last week, and I think he said either millions or billions of people have died. So you might want to go check out Joe Biden's town halls.
If I'm not keeping up with Joe, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, because Joe clearly has it all together.
He has it all together.
All together. We just got to be honest with ourselves when we jump the gun. And I mean that as a nation. This isn't an attack to anyone. No one wants to look like, we want Americans to be unhealthy or sick or catch a virus. But at the same time, we have to be accountable. And we cannot, compound the problem, an economic problem that even the LA Times is saying, the economic impact of this can actually be worse than the virus itself. Well, maybe there were a bunch of conservatives all across the country saying this for the last 2 or 3 months now. So we just got to be objective and hold people accountable for not adapting to the actual data.
Well, let's go to specifics of guns. We've seen all these arbitrary decisions get made that it's unhealthy to go to church. It would somehow be unsafe to purchase a firearm. You've had mayors and governors who are socialists and Democrats really try to use this as an opportunity to reshape society in their image. I see what's on your sweatshirt, freedom. What's the impact on freedom over everything? What's the impact of these decisions on the goal of giving people the ability to govern themselves?
Well, what we're seeing, what the beauty of this is showing us is people that have identified themselves on the left. You're not really leftist. You're leftist, but you're also, again, you're dictatorial and you are a kidnapper. You're
fascist.
Trying to do fascist. Yeah, you are actually trying to hold the American people in your state hostage. Okay.
Right.
Then at the same time on the right, and we have to be critical. The beauty of this is we're seeing rhinos identify themselves and come from behind cover. We're seeing people pretending to be conservative from whatever party. We're seeing people pretend to be conservative that are actually statists. We have to conserve the Constitution. We have to conserve the Bill of Rights. We have to conserve our financial strength. So when you're talking about billions and trillions of dollars of bailouts, and you're talking about highlighting, a Cuomo and ignoring the great job that DeSantis has done down in Florida, when a third of the deaths are in, your particular state, Mr. Cuomo, you cannot deny the fact that there's clearly a mainstream media slant. You're hard pressed to deny that. But the beauty for us is, in firearms world, even leftists are my leftist friends, and I have liberal friends. I love them. I'll give them the shirt off my back because just being around me long enough.
I wish you'd give him that, Maj. I wish you'd give him that shirt. Give him that shirt.
Right. I could not tell them more smoothly how contradictory leftist policies have been. You've said we're not gonna have police come, get actual crime. We're gonna let, some bad guys, and I don't think all of the guys in jail should be in jail, but we're gonna also let some pedophiles out of jail. And we're also gonna tell you that you can't purchase firearms to defend yourself. My leftist friends have called me nonstop, and the government on that leftist side is exposing itself. They've done a lot of the heavy lifting for me for our work at Black Guns Matter. And so it's a high contradiction. Governor Wolf here in Pennsylvania initially tried guns aren't essential. I'm sorry. When do we understand that the Second Amendment is not being essential to the way of American life?
It is amazing. It's amazing. There was a time when a liberal stood up, right, for an individual's rights. Always stand with the small guy, the little guy, right, against the powerful interests. And it's kind of shifted, as you said, to the point where they're statist authoritarians. They're trampling on our rights and using these as opportunities to trample on our rights. And the other thing I think that's been amazing in the coverage is this idea that somehow Chinese corona is taking a bigger toll on people of color. You live in a big city. You said you went for a run by the Rocky Steps in Philly. Is Chinese corona racist?
So it depends on what channel you watch.
Yeah.
On
That's
CNN,
right.
And depending on what time you watch the channel. So, for example, in the beginning, the leftist media said, Black people can't catch the coronavirus. That was the beginning of it. Nah, man, we can't catch that. Okay. Now it is disproportionately affecting. Now, here's where I will agree. In talking to these medical professionals, this is I'm talking about different parts of the country. It's starting at your respiratory system. It's becoming bacterial. And then that bacterial system problems get into your bloodstream, and then you go into organ failure. That is operating too fast for it to generally be something that is a naturally occurring virus. So I agree with that based on me speaking to medical professionals. So I do think that this was manufactured. That's my opinion and my view. With that being the case, if you have pre-existing issues of bad health in any community, respiratory issues, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, you have a pre-existing condition that makes you much more susceptible to this virus. The super contradiction is how some leftist places have said, like California, hey, we don't want you to be outside in the sun, the actual life giver of everything on the planet. We don't want you to involve in wind and go to the beaches where there's an abundance of natural things that strengthen your immune system. So no, the coronavirus isn't racist unless you happen to be watching some leftist media, some fake news of that nature. What it is exposing, and this is another thing that I'll call a beautiful ugly. This is something that's exposing that if you, of any ethnicity in America, of any melanin content or lack thereof, you should be thinking about your health choices. You shouldn't be, laughing at the hoteps because we're eating organic fruits and veggies and trying to limit our GMO. You should be thinking about that. We've lived through something. There's a ton of teachable moments from this, and we got to make sure that we're on top of it.
Maj, for me, I did my annual CPAC diet, and I just kept going. And I feel great because I did that, and I stopped smoking cigars because my girls were worried that they kept reading that corona could, affect your respiratory system. So, those are little steps. But, as I've said on the show, my 80-year-old mother hung out with the patient that got so much notoriety at CPAC. She hung out with him every day, but she had been on a real health kick and had dropped a significant amount of weight herself. And thank God she was shielded from getting corona or getting sick for sure. So this is all great news. And so I really agree. I echo what you're saying. And I don't mean to make light of the fact that people have died. And if you get it in the wrong health situations, it can be, you can pay the ultimate price. So we want to make sure that we pray for people and that we respect the struggle people have gone through. We just got to, I think your message is we just got to keep a balance to things. There's a balance to life. Everything takes a balance. But there's no balance. There's no balance when it comes to your love and respect for the Second Amendment. That's chiseled in stone, and we got to always respect it.
Yeah, we all in on that. We all in on that all day, every day. Second Amendment is how we defend everything else, and we protect the values that we have as Americans. There's a reason why there's a lot of people trying to come into our nation, and a lot of hardworking, solid people from other nations as well. But we all in on that Second Amendment. That's the one area where I'm gonna be, I'll let the balance lean a little bit more right.
Well, the balance in the Second Amendment is that if we don't have individual rights, you don't really have a nation made up of responsible citizens, right, who can govern themselves. Maj Toure, we always love talking to you. Thanks for being on CPAC Live. And how do folks get a hold of you and learn more about your organization?
Everyone can follow me on social media. I'm very active at Maj Toure, MAJTOURE. We are at Black Guns Matter. We do firearm safety training, conflict resolution, political education in our classes. We try to offset that price to make it free for beginners. If you want to donate to that work, please, 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 if you've been moved by anything that we've talked about today, GoFundMe.com/Black Guns Matter. One of you rich guys or women that got an extra $500 million laying around, we could use a little bit of help.
I think the Kennedy Center should send some of the $25 million they got, or Harvard University should send it to you, Maj. That's what I think.
I need PBS to give up some of that $75 million that they got. Come on, guys.
I agree completely. So next up, we're going to have another great guest, Peter Pitts, who's going to talk to us about really some of the specific medical data that's out there and how we can understand that in order to make good personal decisions. But first, a great clip of the president who literally made tingles go up our legs because he never made a mistake, never had any corruption. No President Obama officials ever went to jail because they did everything just perfectly. Watch this clip. We'll be right back at you on the other side.
Okay. Because it basically says,
so you're saying if you're involved, no corruption there at all? No.
That's not what I'm saying. That's actually
no. But I want to know what you're saying. You're the leader of the country. You're saying no corruption.
No.
None.
No. There were some boneheaded decisions. Out of a
but
local
no
office.
Mass corruption.
Not even mass corruption. Not even a smidgen of corruption. Obviously.
Okay.
So you had no idea that President Obama was, batted 1,000 as the president of the United States. I remember when President Obama was first elected, there was these billboards that went up around the country with George W. Bush's face, and it said, "Did you miss me yet?" I don't see any billboards with Obama's face because I don't think anybody misses Barack Obama. And the more we see of Joe Biden, the more they aren't fond memories. They're nightmares that come rushing back. And we are really honored now to be joined by a friend of CPAC, Peter Pitts, who's the president of the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest, which is a long term for an institution, Peter, but it sounds like exactly what we need at this moment with the coverage that we all have to watch and read. I try to watch much less of it, actually, really nowhere, hardly anywhere. Peter Pitts, thanks for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure. A real pleasure for me. Thank you.
And now let's get specifically to this question of you're an American, you're a decent human being, you don't want to make people sick around you, you don't want to get yourself sick or your family sick. What is the most common sense thing Americans can do right now to avoid getting infected with Chinese corona?
I think the most important thing that we can all do to do the right thing is to be good neighbors. And that means personal responsibility, appropriate and sane social distancing, solid personal hygiene. Yes, washing your hands really does make a difference, and wearing a mask. And I know that wearing a mask can sometimes become a political statement, or not wearing a mask one way or the other, but it really does make a difference. Not only does it help you stay healthier, but it helps other people in your immediate surroundings stay healthier. It's the right thing to do. So I think short of a vaccine, we're going to continue to beat down COVID-19 by taking personal responsibility for doing so.
Do you think that basically every American has been exposed to this virus by now?
I think a large majority. I don't think we'll ever really know an exact number, but anything above 20% is huge, and we're well above 20%. The question becomes, what does being infected mean to different populations? For 85% of us who get COVID-19, it means being ill at home for about 2 weeks, get plenty of rest and liquids and tender loving care, as available, and then going to resume your duties. For about 15%, older people, people with respiratory conditions, other serious healthcare conditions, the folks who are hospitalized. Those are the folks that have to be very careful, and we've developed good protocols and good treatments for them. So as we're all bombarded with statistics, for me, one of the key statistics is how many people are being hospitalized, and then how many people are walking out of the hospital. And what we're seeing now is more people who are hospitalized, the high risk groups, are surviving and going home, and that's a huge victory.
So how do you know 85% of the folks that contract this virus have this very typical 2-week period of time? Where do you go to get these numbers? Are you going to the CDC website? Are you going somewhere else? Like, where do we go to get the information that's going to be the most solid?
Well, some of it is just pure common sense. I believe that going to the CDC website and the FDA website are two really solid places. I mean, the information, unfortunately, can be a bit geeky, and they use science speak, but that's appropriate. But it really is available right there. And it's not political. It's pretty straightforward. And when you listen to governors or politicians or pundits and they're trying to spin the numbers, that's not right. I mean, anybody that sounds like they're making a political statement, I'm automatically suspicious of those people.
Let me ask you a question about this, the wearing of masks. 2 questions. One is a medical question. Very quickly, if you're not sick and you wear the mask, there's a lot of reporting about that you can actually wear your mask in a way that you can actually be touching your face more because people are fiddling with it a lot, as you see these kind of half-wit reporters do in the press briefing room at the White House. So, is there a chance that wearing a mask can actually cause you to be less safe or less healthy?
I've heard that as well. And from my perspective, there's no downside to wearing a mask. Wearing a mask, if you touch your face more, if you sneeze with a mask on, you're not going to get more ill than if you were not wearing a mask. But I think one of the things about wearing a mask, which is interesting, is that it reminds all of us that we're in this together. And if any positive comes out of this, I think the value of community, of us all pulling in the same direction for victory, is tremendously useful. And I think
I think that's right. I think it's less of a medical feature of this and more of, I think when people see you in a mask, it reduces the blood pressure of people who are very, very concerned. I think it relaxes people in a public setting when they see you in a mask. I think there's no question about that. But then the second political question I have for you is, does a mayor or a governor have the right to make you wear a mask, wear gloves? Have they taken this too far with some of their prohibitions? And shouldn't this just be, as you said, like a golden rule, individuals making these decisions more?
I think that's a nice way to put it, kind of the golden rule of COVID-19 responsibility. I think the more government tells you to do things, the more people push back. I'll give you an example. I mean, a bunch of years ago, when Mike Bloomberg was mayor of New York, he wanted to ban certain types of sugary sodas. And people said, listen, Mayor, I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions here. And maybe drinking sugary sodas may not be the best thing, but if you tell me to do it, I'm not interested. I think that we need to decide on our own what's the right thing to do. And I think that's going to drive this conversation.
This is a perfect time to bring in Mark Weiermuller, who has an excellent question from Chicago, Illinois. Mark.
Hello, CPAC Live. This is Mark Weiermuller in Chicago, Illinois. I've attended CPAC for the past 4 years, and I just want to say keep up the good work, everybody out there. My question today for Peter: Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker might never open up the state, especially bars, restaurants, hairstylists, nail salons, schools, and churches, etc., especially churches. Since other states next door to us, Wisconsin and Indiana, have opened up this week, can you give our governor some medical advice so we can start getting back to normal and opening up Illinois right now? Thank you.
What a great question. And I think it's relevant to every state that borders states that are doing different things. At a certain point, government's going to lose control if they don't allow people to live their lives, go outside, go to restaurants and bars. Governments need to be guiders. They need to be the expert sources of information, dictating personal behavior oftentimes results in the exact opposite of the behavior that you want to have. I think opening up beaches is a great example. The more states say, don't go to the beach, don't go to the beach, don't go to the beach, the more people say, gee, I'd really like to go to the beach, as opposed to kind of allowing people to go to the beach and providing opportunities to do it responsibly. I believe that our governors, whether they're in Illinois or elsewhere, need to be the places that we go to learn the tactics for good, solid COVID-19 behavior rather than viewing them as the enemy.
Yeah, I think that's a nice common sense answer. And one of the other aspects of going through this Chinese corona time is the changes to our healthcare and our education systems. You know a lot about our healthcare system and the changes that need to be made. I believe that you understand well the types of innovations that we need. I, for one, am a member of Liberty Health Share, which I think you are as well, a new and different way to try to take care of your personal healthcare expenses. What have you seen with this huge rebirth in telemedicine and getting the appropriate insurance coverage for these types of visits? Are we really going to change the healthcare system for the better because of this pandemic?
I think by shaking things up, it's pointed people to lots of different options that they never considered before. And telemedicine is certainly part of that. I think people are also going to start thinking about what are my options for healthcare coverage. Traditional insurance, health sharing, Liberty you mentioned is a great example. People want options. We don't want one size fits all propositions. A lot of people on the left will say, see, this is why we need socialized medicine. And my argument is this is exactly why we don't need socialized medicine.
I have to remind you, Peter, it was socialism in China, right, that resulted in a pandemic of this virus. It's going to be freedom in places like America, and we talked about in our last show, Israel, and these other more open economies. That's where the cure is going to come from.
That's right. And you also have to recognize, from an innovation perspective that, biopharmaceutical innovation relative to therapeutics and a vaccine, they're not going to come from socialist countries. They don't really reward free market thinking the way we do. I mean, you get what you incentivize. And when you incentivize smart thinking, that's what you get.
Let me throw one other thing at you here as we're unfortunately going to be coming to a close. Peter, you have a lot of these governors, like the governor of Illinois and other governors like the governor of Michigan. I'm not mentioning their names. I think they're getting enough notoriety with their own insane decisions. But you have a lot of people, and my wife and I were very worried that the school systems in Northern Virginia will not open again in the fall. And maybe that's politics, maybe that's panic, but I know it's unwise. The thing that really has us worried is this mantra of you can't leave your house until I said cure, that's really inaccurate, some type of inoculation like a flu shot. Until we have that, we really can't open things back up. Please tell folks watching CPAC Live why that is not a balanced approach.
Yeah, you can't wait for a miracle to happen. We need to send our kids back to school responsibly, understanding hygiene and social distancing and masks and things that we can do ourselves to mitigate COVID-19. But keeping our kids home isn't helpful. It's not going to necessarily keep them much healthier. People still get sick staying in at home. Plus, as far as kids are concerned, they tend to be carriers rather than suffering from the disease itself. You can't live with fear. You have to deal with reality. And the reality is we can open our schools responsibly, and we can open them sooner rather than later.
And if schools, primarily, obviously, young people, elementary schools, grammar schools, whatever terms the educrats have come up to call those young, tender-aged school children, it really is true with the numbers you're looking at where you said you get geeked out. Kids are not a primary concern. I mean, I'm sure there's cases, tragic cases, but they are primarily the safest demographic, right?
That's right. I mean, obviously there are issues with kids, but the very, very small minority of kids that suffer from problems don't represent the vast majority. And you can't live your life with fear. And when you pick up the New York Times, it sounds as though every day the sun is going to explode and we're going to enter into a new ice age. We have to recognize what's actually happening on the ground, balance the risks and the benefits, and proceed forward, whether it's going back to school or going back to work.
Yeah, and this is if you could say one thing to everybody who's really concerned about this virus and really concerned they're going to get sick, what would be the most optimistic characteristic of this pandemic? Is it the fact that even if you get sick and God forbid go to the hospital, you have a high percentage chance of walking out with your health intact?
What I tell people is, first of all, relax. If at worst you get coronavirus 19, you will ride it out of the home and then you'll be fine. If you're very ill and you have to go to the hospital, we're dealing with those folks better and better every day. Fewer and fewer people are having serious issues. That we are actually winning this battle despite what you might hear on the media.
Yeah, so maybe what you're also saying is getting stressed out can make you sick, and watching television coverage that is panicky, hyperventilating, and not accurate can make you sick.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the best thing you can do is watch reruns of your favorite programs. And the worst thing you can do is get stuck watching news conferences and network coverage of COVID-19.
So are you really telling our viewers that they should be going on our website at conservative.org and watching their favorite parts of CPAC 2020? Is that what you're telling them?
I think going back and watching CPAC 2020, 2019, 2018, fabulous education. The messages just never get old, and they're positive, they're free market, they're good American messages. Yes, watch CPAC as much as you want. It can only help.
That's great. Well, Peter Pitts, we really appreciate you joining us today on CPAC Live. And Wednesday, we're going to have another great show. We're going to be joined by Ambassador Robert Lighthizer, the trade representative, who has done a really historic job of implementing President Trump's trade agenda, which focuses on bilateral trade agreements and really scrapping old agreements that are no longer relevant in the modern economy, and really rethinking the aspects of globalism and focusing on some of their really, really dreadfully wrong downsides. So you'll want to watch Wednesday at 3:30 as well. We appreciate y'all joining us on CPAC Live. We're loving doing the show. We'll see you Wednesday, and y'all stay safe. Take care.